Right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome this evening. This is Climate Conversations and SG Parents for Climate Action collaborative webinar that we've been hosting. This is the third time now. Today's topic is about climate action versus convenience, how parents can be role models to our kids in Singapore. And we're really, really glad today to have two parents who have been on this journey of trying to instill sustainability in their lives of their families together with their children, to maybe share with us some of the trials and tribulations of that journey, but also the joys that come from that journey. So I'm very glad to have Julia and Wan-Ting with us today. I'll just give a very quick introduction to Climate Conversations, and then I'll ask Julia and Wan-Ting to give a quick introduction about themselves. Climate Conversations is an organization on climate action that has been working in Singapore since the end of 2017. We come together as small groups of friends, colleagues, to help people understand what does climate change mean to all of us who live in Singapore, and what is the type of actions that all of us can take over time to be able to drive deeper and more meaningful climate action here in Singapore. This series of webinars with parents really was born out of the first few conversations that we've had with small groups of parents at the beginning of this year, where they were sharing with us some of the difficulties and challenges that they face as parents navigating the very complex topic of climate change. So the series of webinars was really developed to help and hopefully be able to engage and listen to every one of us that are in different parts of this journey. So I'll hand over quickly to Julia and Wan-Ting to say hi and introduce yourself a little bit. Hi, Julia. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Xin-Ying, and thanks for the opportunity to take part this evening. My name's Julia, and I am a mum of two pretty young children. They're aged 5 and 8. I suppose my journey in terms of wanting to get into the environmental space began around 10 years ago now. And it started off in the shape of wanting to become a zero waster, inspired by people like Bee Johnson. So I started off from a pretty extreme place and soon realized that that was soon going to lead to burnout. And I needed to kind of pare back my efforts. At the time I was pregnant and working full time, and so juggling all these concerns. On the one hand, we're helping to alleviate some of my concerns about the environment, but on the other hand, we're becoming a little bit overwhelming. So I'd say the journey over the last 10 years has been a journey where I started from that place and have taken different steps over the years that have suited our lifestyles and our growing family, and the move as well from London to Singapore 5 years ago.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Definitely a journey that you've been on. Wan-Ting, you want to say hi?
Hi, I'm Wan-Ting. I'm also a mom of two. So my journey began when my kid was pretty young. I have a 7-year-old, and now I have a baby, 1-year-old. So my older child, my daughter, she was pretty young, and you started to realize that, you're thinking about, okay, what can I give her? I want to make sure I make a decent living, leave her with some stuff, make sure she has good education, everything, right? But what about the very basic? This earth that we live in. What can I actually give it to her, pass it down in a condition where, optimistically speaking, the same as what we have inherited, right? So it got me thinking, I identify quite a bit with what Julia said about just having that anxiety and sometimes being tired and thinking about all these things. But on this journey, we try to just pick up small things along the way. And for myself, I work quite a fair bit. I don't really have a lot of time to think about, okay, what else, like think about maybe DIYing stuff or things like that. So it's just about every little bit of things that we do, and anything that we consume, some of the activities that we do on the weekend, how do I replace it with alternatives that are more green, things that we don't need, maybe we don't buy, things like that, right? Along this journey, it's nice to meet other parents like Julia. I have met some other moms as well, and it's encouraging along the way. So just having met these people, make me feel that, okay, we're not alone. I know a lot of parents probably feel the same way as well, and that's pretty encouraging.
Well, thank you both for those introductions, and that last point about not feeling alone. That's where I'm really grateful the two of you being able to join us today, because that was definitely our intention when we put together this particular webinar about parents thinking about their role and how they can role model. Hopefully, as folks chance upon this webinar or join us today, I think there are a few people who have joined us with kids ranging from 0 to 12. So I think both of you are covering both ends for us, definitely. But yes, definitely, that's what we're trying to achieve, so that people don't feel quite so alone in their journey. But I really wanted to maybe start with a question. When we think about wanting to start on this journey of sustainability or climate action, I think the starting point is about a love for nature. And I posed a question to both of our speakers today to share some photos that we can kind of talk a little bit, start a conversation a little bit about what our connection, your family's connection, or your connection with nature is like. So let me just bring up those slides and see whether or not we can share a little bit more about them. There you go. Ooh. Yes. One thing you shared this picture of your daughter at I suppose it's a dock somewhere. Must be a beautiful seaside or lakeside area. Do you want to maybe share a little bit about that?
Yeah. I wanted to share pictures of my childhood, but I'm not exactly a nostalgic person, so I can't find any pictures of my childhood. But what I wanted to share is this is actually a lake in British Columbia. My husband's Canadian, so we used to spend quite a bit of time before COVID, traveling a lot to beautiful city of Vancouver. And this is one of the road trips that we took. And we stopped at this lake. We went to a hot spring, I think. She was quite young, and she was having a time off in life. But so I mean, we can't deny that Singapore is not exactly like full of nature. It's getting really nice now. A lot of animals coming back to the city. But man, when I spent 10 years of my life in Canada, the nature is just beautiful. I love the mountains a lot. We did quite a few road trips in the Rocky Mountains. I've seen little bears, a little bear cub and a mama bear on the side of the road before. It's just amazing. It's you just don't get that here. My favorite actually is when the leaves turn yellow during autumn. And spent quite a bit of time in Algonquin Park. That's actually in Ontario, not in British Columbia. So when they turn yellow and they're crisp and they're dry and you're just jumping around, it's really nice, and you feel like I mean, I was quite old at that time. I think at least maybe 20s, but you feel like a kid again in a huge playground. So I really loved it. yeah, but hopefully I can bring her more to on more of these trips. That's when she was very, very young. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Nature reminding us to be kids again. I think that's really something that we all want to be reminded of, how it was when we were young. Then that's actually the photos that Julia actually managed to find. I think this is your childhood, or is this your children?
It is.
I'm just going by the color of the photos.
This is mine. Yeah, I can't take credit for finding these. My mum very kindly dug them out for me. So that's why they're a little bit kind of vintage style. But she's done a good job. You can just about make out some of the detail, I think. So yeah, I grew up in Surrey in the southeast of England, and I was lucky enough to spend a lot of time outdoors growing up. We had a back garden that we spent a lot of time playing in as children and exploring in. We had a little area in the garden that was our part of the garden where we could grow plants, mainly herbs and things. And we would also visit parks and gardens and local woods on the weekends, as well as here you can see fishing in a local brook and ponds. And sometimes we would take frogspawn back with us and watch them develop into frogs. And there is something called the National Trust in UK as well, where land is entrusted to this charitable organisation with stately homes or parkland, but they're very beautiful areas that we would go to almost every Sunday, and I have got such strong memories of those areas that I can still walk around them entirely in my head, and they're all as they were when we were young. So when we go back to those spaces, it takes me right back to my childhood as well, and it's so beautiful now to be able to take my own children to those same places, so they develop the same memories as I have. And funnily enough, my mum still lives in the same house. So if they wanted to, they could still play in the same garden as well. But will they be
climbing that same tree with the ladder?
I think we upgraded the ladder.
Oh, okay, good.
It looks pretty rickety, doesn't it? Yeah, I think we've got a nice lightweight aluminium one now, but I'm not sure I'm not sure whether I'd let them climb up that high.
Well, yes,
said, we do give them the opportunities to climb as much as they can here in Singapore, but obviously the opportunities are more slim. But where there's a tree that looks climbable, they'll be up it.
Yeah, there was a tree in the botanical gardens in Singapore that had this really, really low branch. So when I was young, low enough for any kid to just kind of like clamber on top of it. So when I was young, that was kind of where the only tree climbing I was allowed to do, because you won't actually hurt yourself if you actually fell off.
Right.
But yes, some of these memories of nature, I think, is kind of dear. And you mentioned being able to build shared memories, and I think Wan Ting has the same thing, right? Like you spend a lot of time in Canada, and some of those memories of the crisp autumn leaves, and hoping to have your child to be able to experience that hopefully more in the future. Definitely some of the things that kind of run through the thread of our lives, and how we then maybe form the foundation of wanting to protect nature. So I think the next part of this is really how do you see yourselves, as a parent, and the idea of that you can role model protecting nature, you can role model sustainable action at home, or climate action. What does role modeling actually mean to you?
Do you want to go first, Julia?
I can, yeah. So I think for me, above all, it would mean setting a good example by actually walking the talk. So in other words, being proactive about making eco-conscious choices and taking eco-conscious actions in our everyday lives. in a way that's aligned with our values and in a way that actually involves their children, insofar as it's practicable. So that we're all, as a family, taking collaborative action towards a shared goal. And I think that helps them develop a sense of responsibility, common responsibility, and inculcates a kind of culture of service as well, where hopefully they're not shy of hard work. I think we've talked about nature. I think as a role model, I would also include prioritizing the importance of spending time outdoors, because I would definitely attribute my love for the earth, my desire to protect and preserve it, to the connections and attachments that I formed with natural spaces when I was younger, and that I continue to form now by spending as much time outdoors as possible. And probably doing so in a way that isn't fearful. It kind of embraces the wild as much as possible, so that the children are encouraged to explore freely rather than to be trepidatious and afraid of getting dirty. Yeah, I would say that leading by example is really the only way with children to genuinely demonstrate what's important to us and to empower them to take action themselves. It's so important to involve them in the sustainable steps that we're taking, so that they have a voice as well, and they know that their opinions are important, and they have a voice in the family. And ultimately that hopefully leads to them being able to advocate for green issues as they get older, and be confident doing so because they've practiced doing that at home. And also it's important for all those steps to be somewhat visible to them, so it's not just kind of mum in the background doing all of the composting or the DIYing, or dad, but I think there's a tendency for it just to fall in the lap of the person who has the primary responsibility for taking care of the home. But the more we involve our kids, the more visible it is, the more benefit they're going to glean from the activities that we're undertaking as well. And that means that they then they're then equipped with the skills that they need to carry on those habits as they grow older and have their own households to take care of. And there's also an element of persistence and consistency, I would say. And here I would say that my somewhat stubborn determinism helps. Because we're quite reluctant to give up on things once we've committed to them. I've read Christina Figueres's book. She was the for those who aren't familiar with her, she was the former executive secretary of the UNFCCC, and she refers to actions as stubborn optimism, which probably encapsulates our approach perfectly, or my approach, I should say. I'm bringing everyone else along for the ride with me. And I was also thinking today, I mean, questions are asked sometimes about what motivates us to take these steps. That happens more and more with my older child. And something that I was nervous about earlier on in my journey was how to approach these actions with my children. How honest and open would I be about what's happening in the world, and what, you know, the why behind these actions that we take. And I think when they're younger, they don't necessarily, they don't notice what we're doing over and differently to other people, because all they see is what happens in their own home. And so there's no real need to explain things to them. It's just nice that they're involved in these more sustainable habits that are just kind of par for the course for them. It's nothing special. It's no extra effort for them. They're not doing anything differently to what they used to do in the same way that we are. But yeah, as they get older, obviously questions are asked, and there's a big kind of question mark over how much information you give kids, what's age appropriate. And on the one hand, you want to give them enough information to agitate them towards action, and to not risk them becoming apathetic about the environment and all the issues that they're trying to address. But on the other hand, you don't want to give them so much information that they feel powerless and depressed. So I think this is one of the really kind of tricky aspects of being a role model to children as a parent, knowing how much information to give them, what's right at the right stage, but also not shying away from giving them more detail when they're ready for it, when they start to comprehend consequences around age 7 or 8, and then they start to understand, at least at a basic level, the why behind why we're choosing to take one approach over the other.
So much is encompassed in role modeling. One thing, I suppose you are also you're it's probably all rolled into one, in stuff that you're doing. But if you were to pass some of these apart, I captured a couple of things just now about helping them to not be afraid of nature. Number one, that to understand that confidence can kind of demonstrate persistence, and that confidence actually does get built over time. So you do that. Are there similar aspects for you, or other things that just kind of consistently come up as you try to be a role model?
Actually,
Sure.
I agree that we definitely being consistent and being optimistic about it, and you need to sell it to your family too. Sometimes they don't necessarily want to do the things that you want to do. Sometimes it may impact them a bit more than myself. I think I was sharing with both of you previously. I usually send my husband out for takeouts, and he's the one who has to take all the heavy containers to bring them out to buy. And he's like, "Oh, it's so easy for you. You just have to say it," right? Things like that. But then sometimes you gotta sell it as well. I did pick out some of the things. Julia, I love I went to actually after our last conversation, I went to look up your account, and I remember I saw I remember one of your posts, and I had liked it previously, where you had because you mentioned DIY, right? And you had done a DIY on a bed sheet, and you've dyed it yellow. It was like
yes,
shade of yellow. And that kind of thing, I know, like I can never do. But when I see that, I'm like, oh, I'm so, I feel like it's so fun. Like
it can be fun, right? Yeah. And they're the really nice things to involve the kids in, the things that are joyful and fun. So it's not all it's not all hard work. It's just a different type of work, and a work that is fun. Yeah.
Yeah, I loved it. I mean, although I can never do that, but it does.
You could.
Like, okay, I'm gonna do my own little things and all that. I don't think so. I can't DIY stuff. So, but that's I really love that. The other thing that I picked out, I guess I'm more like what can I do? I don't think I'm able to have a really good, candid conversation with my daughter. She's already 7. She's very eloquent. She says very interesting things. There are some things where I still shy away from, because I haven't overcome the hurdle myself of being okay with what's happening in this world, and if I don't want to get into overthinking myself, so kind of just focus a lot more on actions. Okay, what do we do? What can we do? Keep it fun and light, right? I know one day I'll probably have to come to that, but I think that would be something interesting, and I think it would be nice to hear from other parents as well, in terms of how they talk to their kids about this. I think
that's a really interesting point that. I'm sorry, I was just going to say it's a really interesting point you make about shying away from saying certain things, because I find that often my kids are louder advocates for things than I am, because they're less socially conscious, I suppose. So they're less worried about how things are going to land and what people are going to think. And the things that they say are more impactful because they're coming from the mouths of children, right? And I have found that the kids themselves are an excellent role model to us. I think the assumption often is that it's always going to be the adults being the role models to the children, but often they role model to me. And so I think it's so important to kind of actively listen to kids and support their ideas, help them to take projects forward, and and yeah, take on board the comments they're making. So it makes me laugh because I'm remembering when I saw my daughter's teacher, she said, "Do you know what? Ava said to me today in class, don't throw that whiteboard marker away. It's a refillable one." And she said, "You're quite right, Ava." I've forgotten about that. and likewise, you know, my kids will pick me up on stuff, you know, habits that I've tried to pass down to them. Sometimes I trip up and forget because it's still newish to me, and they'll be my reminder. So
yeah, definitely. Actually, I have a story on that too. I fully agree. It's not just us being a role model to them, you know, it's a two-way thing. And as we are on our journey, they're theirs as well. I remember one time we went to the beach to pick up garbage. And that was one instance, I think it's the second time that we did it. I was picking up confetti at the beach. I don't know why. Who thought it was a good idea? It was those plasticky types, the shiny types. Confetti. I spent 15 minutes picking up all these tiny pieces at the beach, and obviously a lot of them had escaped, right? Probably in the water by now. And me and my husband were not in a good mood at all. Like, picking up garbage is not our favorite thing to do. And now you see inconsiderate people and you get so mad sometimes. So mad. We finished what we needed to do. You know, we brought her back, and then we were exchanging, you know, we were exchanging some thoughts, and we're complaining about, you know, how some people are like this, blah, blah, blah. We're so mad. I don't know if we can come here and do this again. And then my daughter said, "Mommy, but the ocean says thank you." Right? And that's so simple. I think she was probably 5. I think that was probably COVID period. And she says, "The ocean says thank you." And that really changed my perspective, right? And you know, like, most adults probably feel the same way as me. It's like, well, what can one person do when there are so many inconsiderate people out there? But they see it differently, and they sometimes bring that optimism into it, and that's really nice. And that's how sometimes, you know, it really helps you carry on as well. I really like that.
That's such a brilliant that is a very brilliant sentiment, you know, that there is the gratitude to side of it, to the angst, right? Like, the, you know, as long as we find a way to flip some of these incidents around, there's like a totally different emotion that you go out and do these actions on. Before I move into some of these actions and ask you guys about some of those that you've taken, you've already mentioned a few. There's a question that came from the audience about the tips about striking a balance. And I guess here is, you know, the tips of striking a balance of how much information to give. I think one thing you mentioned already, that you've been finding it difficult as well. I don't know if, Julia, you've had some guardrails or some touch points in how you make decisions around that.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. Most of the time, I don't anticipate that a question is going to be asked by them, or that we'll be in a particular situation where the question comes up. Like, we'll be walking along the canal and there'll be loads of trash in there, and they are aware where that can end up, and or at least my older daughter is, and this is also the problem with having kids of different ages with different kind of capacities for taking this kind of information on board. So, you know, she'll say, "Oh yeah, that's really worrying, Mummy, because that's gonna end up maybe in the oceans, and that's going to affect all the fish." And my son, you can see his face kind of crumpling, and he's not quite ready for the depth of information that she sometimes discloses. And so I don't have a straightforward answer for the tips on striking a balance. I think my tendency is to over-explain. So I have been teaching myself to pare back my explanations and just keep them very short for my younger son, short and sweet, and just keep it at quite a basic level. you would say, and also turn it around to the positives, like the actions that we could take. So there's rubbish in the river. We need to make sure that when we see rubbish lying on the sidewalk, that we pick it up, and that we don't throw rubbish anywhere other than in the bin. And then for my daughter, when we're alone, I might give a little bit more information if she asks, why is it a problem, Mummy? Where does it end up? Then I can explain there's a risk that it could end up in the ocean and that it affects marine life and the ecosystems there. But I think we have to not paint the full kind of picture of desperation, but always try and bring it back round to what positive actions we can take to remain optimistic and hopeful and to feel empowered.
Yeah, it is a bit of it. That's a big challenge, right?
It is, yeah.
To find the hope, but it's such a delicate topic to talk about. But I think both of you obviously have already been doing quite a lot. I wanted to go to some of the examples of actions that already as a family you're taking to reduce your carbon footprint. And maybe if you wouldn't mind maybe sharing an example of a practical challenge that you had actually faced as you were trying to introduce some of these behaviors at home. What are some of the steps you take? Do you experiment yourself first, or does everybody come together in the part of the experimentation? How does that happen? And I think we also have some pictures here. Yeah.
Yeah, that's us with, I think that's us meeting up with other families, and that's one of the trips where we met up with other families and met new friends, and we went. There was another cleanup that we did.
Yeah, but I think this is the one. You were saying beach cleanups are not the best happy things for you guys to be doing, but this is an example that you were sharing with us in terms of.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Some challenges, I would say. Okay, so maybe like getting some alternatives at home. It was a little bit challenging. I find actually more. He's not here, but more so with my husband sometimes. Because I mean, I guess adults are like, they have their habits and all that. But I'm glad we found ways. So one of the things he used to love to do is to drink iced lemon tea. That's like his favorite thing. And to me, it's just bottle after bottle, right? And it's just one drink anyway. Why do we do that? Can't you just drink water? And apparently he cannot. So he found a way. Eventually, we buy calamansi now. He chops it in half and then he puts it in a bottle. We squeezes it, put it in a bottle, and then he'll drink his water bottle. Right? I mean, it's a very simple alternative, and I think he does it more for health reasons. But I'm really glad there's like just a lot less plastic every time you take a drink, right? That took a little bit of time. I don't think that people like to be pointed out where there are some changes that you could be making or you could be doing better, that kind of thing. Nobody really likes that, myself included. So for some time, I would like to take the cab to work, and then now we're like staying beside the MRT, and it's a no. I'm taking MRT every day now to work. And I think sometimes it takes other people to remind you. And even though it's a challenge, and even though sometimes when people remind you, you might not like it, I think ultimately, if you think about it, it's not about, are you doing well? Is there a scorecard or whatnot? We live on this earth. We are going to leave carbon footprint, right? Like, there's nobody that will cost zero carbon footprint. But then as we go, we can do better each day. And we just try to do better each day, right? I think that's kind of the mentality that we have. Another thing that the change that we made, that my husband was complaining, but he was good with in the end, is using unbleached bamboo toilet paper. That was a little bit hard at first because it's slightly more expensive, and according to him, not nice on the bum. Not as nice. He likes the really soft type. I don't know if I'm oversharing here, but I think he's fine with it. But like, that's such a simple change. I don't even have to think. It doesn't cost me more time. It costs me a little bit more money, but I think overall, just identifying these areas and then slowly changing it, I think it's great. And we as a family, we started Una Loves Our Planet, right? I started an account just because we want to be accountable. Like I don't like to share a lot, but just putting it out there makes me feel like somebody's watching me, and then the more I can do, the better. I think, I shared this with you last time as well. If I had to show up on people's feed, because we're checking our social media accounts so much, instead of showing them, this is what I had for brunch, this is a fancy place I went to. What if they were just reminded just for that 2 seconds they're looking at the post that, oh, you could be doing something different today, things like that. So that's a little bit of a challenge for me because I'm pretty private person, and I always feel really shy to share, and I'm always worried if I share something, then someone's gonna say, if one day I had a bubble tea or something, someone's gonna say something. Yeah, and I've had comments like that, and then I just take it in stride. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. Maybe I could have done better, and then maybe I'll change. And actually, someone said that to me. It's like, oh, you don't have to take the car. The MRT is just right here. I'm like, okay, you know what? That's a good reminder. So I think it's kind of like a mindset thing as well, like kind of change it a little bit. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, because at first when I was thinking about this question was really just about challenges like on a day-to-day thing, but what you were saying just now is just also this thing about where people are fearful that they're being judged of not actually doing enough, right? And that's also a barrier, and that's also a practical challenge. Like if you went halfway, it's not good enough. Will you therefore not do it, right? Because you're just so
yes.
Yeah,
that's a good question.
Yeah.
My conclusion is it's better than not going anywhere at all.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I think most people who actually is like friends or colleagues who see my page, they actually come and tell me, oh, that's a really great thing, and then they will share something else that they did. So nobody's gonna be. I mean, some people do that, but it's very little. I think most people are like, oh, I saw that you did this. It'll just be a very small thing, right? You just brought some containers, this, for tabao, for takeout and all that. Oh, I'm doing this too. They'll just try to talk about it, and then I think just more people talking about it, it's a good thing. It just gets you just get reminded yourself as well. Yeah.
Julia, you also have a social media handle. You also have been doing a whole bunch of different things at home. An example of a particular challenging one, or maybe how do you create? I think what one thing was talking about was also about accountability or finding ways to reinforce like a behavior. Like, do you have some examples to share there? Was this composting that you were sharing with us? Is that something?
Yeah, that's one of our key activities, which actually ties into the question of a practical challenge that we faced at home as well. But just to address your point about accountability, that's definitely one of the reasons behind why I set up an account as well, coupled with the fact that some friends had asked me what action they could take, and those questions started kind of accumulating, and I thought it would be nice to have some kind of central repository where I could refer people and say, here are some ideas, and most of them are kind of Singapore specific, and there have been challenges attached to that as well. in the sense that when I started up, it was just a question of posting photographs, and then reels were introduced, and all the posts became very fancy, and it felt like there was a lot of there's just a lot of noise out there, isn't there? And some of it's beautifully edited and created, and then I started to shy away from posting for that reason, which is a real shame, because I think it has so much value to it. One, just giving other people inspiration, and like you say, it can be something very small and something that you don't think is worth posting because, you know, maybe people have seen it before, or this is nothing new. And but for some people out there, it will be the first time they're seeing this idea. And also, I think in those moments where you're feeling a little bit despondent, that you're not doing enough, it's quite nice to be able to refer back to the actions that you've taken, to see the journey that you've been on. It's almost like a journal to see your development. And then you could give yourself a pat on the back, because sometimes it really feels like, well, you know, sometimes some aspects of it are fun and joyful, as we discussed, but other aspects of it can be quite hard work. So if you see the journey that you've been on and the progress that you have made, that can be really encouraging. And you know that you can continue on in that vein. Hello. And coming back to the practical challenge, so I had identified a very specific one at home that we had, and I don't want to deter anyone from composting, but in a flat, it has definitely been the aspect of our sustainable journey that has been the hardest. And there was one incident in particular where, rather than buy a 𝘵𝘂 bin, because I hate the idea of purchasing plastic when there's so much there already that can be reused, I had found a cafe that had huge tubs of tahini, a Lebanese restaurant, and I'd managed to negotiate getting 4 from them so I could make my own 𝘵𝘂 bins. And they were all for exactly the same product, so I assume the tubs were identically sized, and that's what you need so that they slot into each other and there's almost a kind of vacuum tightness to it. But it turned out that one of them was just a tiny bit, just a smidgen bigger than the other, which was enough space. I mean, it was not perceptible. It was enough space for fruit flies to get in and lay their eggs. So by the time I lifted up the top section, the top tub that all the food was in, to find the kind of 𝘵𝘂 tea underneath, it was just riddled with larvae and maggots. And dealing with that in a flat is very tough, and horrible. And that was definitely something that fell to me. I had introduced this idea, and I didn't expect anyone else to tidy up. So that was definitely the worst aspect of the journey. And it did get cleared up, and I did buy the 𝘵𝘂 bin. So there was a lesson learned there. But I think that there are some limitations with what you can do in a flat, and I'm definitely pushing the boundaries now with what can be done. The 𝘵𝘂 does have a tendency to smell when you take the lid off as well, which again wouldn't be an issue if it was outside on a balcony or in a garden. And I've gotten used to the smell, or at least I've convinced myself that I have. But the rest of my family, every time it comes out, oh, it stinks in here. But, you know, in time they'll get used to it too. And again, that ties back to what I was talking about earlier, the why, explaining the why behind things so that everyone is a little bit more invested in it. And it's not just a crazy mom's come up with another weird project that we've all got to put up with.
Wow.
So, yeah, that was
that is dedication. That's dedication right there.
And I mean, as a follow up to that, because that's definitely a tough one to try to pull off with all the constraints you have in at home. There's a question from the audience here about thinking about as your children grow, do you think about different types of actions that you may start to introduce over time, or different ways in which you are role modeling over time?
Yeah, I mean, one thing, I don't know if you want to go first, but for us, it was a kind of focus on the basics, and to complement what they learn at school as well. You know, the 3 R's, or you could argue the 5 R's, but certainly the 3 R's is the easiest thing for younger kids to grapple with. So reduce, reuse, and recycle. And you could possibly build in refuse at the front there as well, and rotting for the composting. But those 3 basic things mean that they can help with taking the canvas bag to the supermarket. They have a reusable water bottle, and they are throwing the plastic recycling or glass recycling in the recycling bin. And those habits form quite quickly, and they're very simple for younger kids to master, I think. And it's just something, again, it's just something we do that doesn't require a lot of kind of explanation behind it. So perfect for that age group. And then I think as they grow older, you can, and I'm talking about kind of 6, 7, 8-year-olds, gardening and composting they can get involved in as well. As you saw, my kids come to the community garden with me in 𝘮𝘰𝘭𝘁𝗏, where we take our 𝘵𝘂𝘵 to incorporate it in the heap there. And they love getting their hands dirty, and I love their community there as well. And what we were saying earlier about that feeling of isolation that you can have, and you know, am I the only one taking action? Finding those spaces where there are lots of other people, where you're surrounded by other people, and your kids can interact with those other crazy people who are doing similar practices is really nice, because it helps to kind of build out the circle. So there are lots of good influences on them, and you're not the kind of sole role model. I think you definitely need support in this. So yeah, reaching out to those communities and involving your kids in those, so that then they can have those bigger conversations as they get older, and they've got more people to give them answers. People with different perspectives, different backgrounds, different jobs. Yeah.
For myself, I think as my daughter became older, we do ask her some of the things that, you know, we could be doing. And I agree, community is a big thing. I have this huge family, and we're always asking each other, you know, we don't need this anymore. Does anybody want it? And then somebody will take it, and then we're just using the same stuff over and over again. We're not that extreme now, but there was a very famous T-shirt, I recall, and for my oldest cousin to my youngest cousin, I think that the age gap is about 20 years, and that T-shirt was passed down, and then someone was still wearing it. But I mean, that's just one extreme example. But usually we don't. But things like baby stuff, for example, you use them for a few months, and then, you know, you're passing it on again, and then you're passing it on to the next person. So sometimes I do ask my kid, you know, what do you want? What do you want to do? If you don't want these things anymore, you've outgrown them, who can you give it to? Think about that, right? And as and when I see in her life, she can do, there's opportunities too. So for example, recently I'm just challenging her to, she buys these little snacks from school, and then come in these tiny plastic containers. And she buys them very often. She loves them. So we've collected quite a lot of them. So and then I'm saying, well, what are you gonna do with these? And she said, okay, I'm gonna use them for something else. I'm gonna, you know, some arts and craft. And I'm like, but maybe they can be used again, right? So somehow I convinced her that she needs to. Somehow I convinced her that she needs to. So you need to listen to this, okay? since you're here, I've convinced her that she needs to bring it back to the auntie selling snacks, right? You're gonna do that, okay? And then ask her, why don't you use these again? Like, they're clean now. We've washed them now. You can use them again, right? They're tiny containers. They can last for quite some time if that's the thing that you have to. If that's the thing that you have to do to sell the cookies, then use them again. And next week is the last week of school, right?
Yeah.
So you're gonna have to do it.
Primary one.
Oh, I won't put her on the spot here. Okay, but I think just kind of looking for opportunities as they go through their lives. Like what are more things that you can do? We tried our hand at tree planting. She did give her feedback that all the tools that were provided are not really suitable for kids. They were very heavy for her to pick up, and it is true. I struggle to pick up the hose and the spades myself. But I think maybe we can think about some of that. Okay.
It's really showing up for me in this conversation that we're having today, that there's so much two-way discussion about what actions can be done, how to do more, what's difficult, and I think one thing you can share with us how it develops about the containers going back to school. Maybe on your Instagram in the future we'll find a little bit of an update.
Now I know. I've said it now. Now I've said it. I'm gonna make her do it.
So there's some accountability that needs to happen.
She's been dragging her feet, but she says she'll do it. And I said, what's the worst that can happen? The worst is they're not going to take it back. We're going to bring it home, and then we're going to find something else to do with it, right? And she's like, yes. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, this is so interesting to me, because you guys know the next question. My last part of this discussion, I was going to ask about how to build confidence. How do you feel confident in your journey to be able? And this story that you've just shared is also kind of finding different ways that building confidence for them to ask the right to ask, right? Because as you said, what's the worst that could happen, right? And there is a question from the audience, but I think I might take that last. Maybe we can talk about your journeys of getting confidence in guiding your children to make sustainable choices in life, or your whole family. Maybe share a little bit about your journey of of that. Like, how have you gotten more or less confident over time? What had given you that level of confidence?
For us, I think it swings a little bit. We really try. I think very similar to what Julia was mentioning, I think in the beginning, about giving them voices, right? So I want to enable her as much as possible. So I like to ask her, what do you think you can do? And kind of start from there. And then the part about it is, if she wants to do it, we have to, as a family, we have to commit to it. So there's some things that, it's not our favorite to do, but, if she's suggesting that, okay, maybe today we don't take the car, but we'll use the MRT today. And I'm like, okay, let's do that. Let's bring a baby with a stroller and a huge bag. Let's just do that, because I just want her to know that we're committed to it as well, and then that hopefully gives her enables her and makes her feel that she has the power to make changes. Tell us what you want to do, right? I think that's one of the big things we are really trying to instill in her. Confidence-wise, I don't know. Sometimes it's I feel really great right now. Sometimes not so much. For example, can I compost at home? I don't think I can. I've been researching, the electrical ones. I think they don't stink as much, but they don't really. They cost a lot as well. So things like that. But always trying to find something else that we can do, and then a little bit along the way, kind of thing. So I think to the best of my ability, we're trying. I don't know how far we'll go. Just we'll see.
Cool. Julia?
I would say that my confidence ebbs and flows. So at certain stages, I can feel like I'm on the right track, and definitely all the actions that I've identified as being important are meaningful. And then other times I can start to question that. And I'm not sure that translates so much to my kids, because I will continue with the habits that we have established. But in my mind, I might perhaps be questioning whether I should be doing something a little bit differently. But overall, I would say that my confidence over time has definitely grown. So to begin with, I felt completely at sea and flummoxed, and I got to the stage where I would go in a supermarket and feel very overwhelmed at seeing all of the packaging. And yeah, that was that was not a good place to be. But there was a desperation to it. I absolutely wanted to do something and fast. And something that I felt was effective and worth my time, worth investing my time in. And so, at the outset, pre-kids, when I was working full time, most of my research was done just kind of dipping into YouTube channels and the odd web page here and there. And then in more recent years, when my kids have been young, I've been at home with them, and I've had more time to read books and reports and listen to podcasts, spend lots more time in nature, follow other people on Instagram and take inspiration from them and grow confidence, being with them as a community. And so I think all so my kids just got home. So all of that helps to build a kind of general feeling of confidence. But I anticipate that as the kids grow older, they might be less amenable to engaging in some of the activities that I am instigating. But I hope that we will have built a firm enough foundation so that they are the ones then, maybe they don't want to do something in particular like composting, but they might have other ideas inspired by others or school activities that they're doing, or something they've learned, or something they've just picked up in reading or YouTube, and that they will be asking me if we can engage in certain projects and taking initiative on stuff. So I'm quite excited about how things will change, and I anticipate that we will become more and more role models for each other, rather than me taking the charge. But we will see. Yeah.
Well, forging ahead as the confidence levels ebbs and flows, I think is such a powerful thing. And you mentioned having a range of resources and both virtual and real community, at the community garden, for example, that kind of helps build that level of confidence. I think definitely maybe tips for others to find a few others who can help you be part of a bigger thing as that part of that journey. We have a last couple of minutes, and we have a last question here. Probably a difficult question, but I think one of you alluded to that earlier. What do you say to your children when they ask you why others are not engaging in the same type of sustainable habits?
Well, do you know what? Interestingly, my kids have never asked that. When I was giving thought to kind of who their role models were in general, it occurred to me that it's so important to surround them by people who have got similar values to us. Not to the extent that they live in a vacuum, and of course that's not possible. They will be exposed to other people who are not engaging in similar practices. But if they have a kind of firm understanding of why we do certain things, and there's in the company of others, some others at least, who are doing the same thing, then I think they at least have an understanding of why we are doing it, and that's perhaps I would consider that's the most important thing to hold on to. You know, our understanding of the issues, our beliefs in what we do, and then by extension it becomes, I suppose, less of a preoccupation that other people are not engaging, but it can still be a little bit depressing, I suppose, when I find when we travel abroad, for example, and you see a lot of plastic pollution on the beaches or in the waterways and things, and then you kind of ask, why is there a difference? And I suppose the answer would have to be awareness, number one, which is why education is so crucial to changing habits. Like if we don't know the damage that we're causing, then we're not going to do anything to stop it. And two, building that connection with place and our communities and nature, so that we feel more deeply the impact that we're having on it, and have more of a responsibility towards others. And I'm not sure if time is an excuse. I'm not sure anyone can be too busy not to at least be responsible for throwing away their trash in the right place, and I suppose that's not, strictly speaking, a sustainable habit. That's a kind of a basic kind of civic duty. But for the more kind of wide-ranging sustainable habits, they do require time and commitment, and not everybody's in the right place at a given time to engage in those. And I think when we met up earlier, I mentioned that I went through a stage in my journey where almost a process of mourning, where you feel anger, and that can sometimes morph into resentment towards others who are not doing certain sustainable things. But you realize that you were there once as well, because of lack of time, because of lack of awareness. Sometimes we get caught up in a bubble, don't we? And we're just so damn busy with work and children and all the other things that we have going on in our lives. But as and when that awareness builds, and maybe a little crack of time opens up, we can at least start with the small steps, and then see where that takes us.
I'm super tired.
One thing does this question ever crop up for you?
It sounds, I think once or twice it had. My kid is, I guess, not as, she's quite open. She, like picking up trash, for example, she would, there was a time actually she would even be like, oh, we should pick it up for them. It shouldn't be here. But then you do realize that it's not, it's everywhere. I hate to say that, but and sometimes what we will tell her is, if it's someone that we know, the other people, someone that we know, is there something that we can help remind them? Maybe we can tell them about it. So maybe a little bit of education, a little bit of reminding them, especially if they're her friends or just or her cousins, people we know, and we can have that conversation, right? She hasn't actually asked other people about people that she doesn't really know in front of them. So I think that's a relief for now. Like at least socially, I don't have to worry about that. But I think sometimes she's like, why is there so much garbage at the beach, for example, when we're doing it, and I think that I agree that at some point there is a right and a wrong, right? And some things are just not okay. And we do tell her that, if what we can do, we can only think about what we can do is, if you see people doing that, maybe we can remind them, maybe they don't know better. We can tell them what happens if the garbage goes into the sea, things like that. We also, there was also a time where I recall one time when we were doing that, and it was close to a lot of picnickers at the beach, and then we would say, oh, let's just pick it up in front of them, and then we would remind them, actually my husband actually went to do that. There was an uncle that was throwing just too much garbage on the floor. I don't know what he was eating, maybe peanuts or something, and then we just went up, and then it's like, oh, maybe you could try not to. That was just one instance. Usually we don't, but sometimes it does cross your own. There's this line inside you, and you do believe that there is a right and wrong, and why not? I don't think anyone's gonna be really mad at you for just reminding them what they should be doing in the first place. Yeah.
That also takes a lot of like courage, right? As you said, it's quite easy to look inward and say, hey, this is something that we can control ourselves. We're responsible for our own actions. But then to kind of also go beyond that and say, how do we help others, or how do we communicate to others that we are obviously seeing doing something inappropriate or wrong for those. I think that also takes a lot of courage, and both of you are kind of trying to find that line where it's something that you can help your child build that courage as well, but also be kind about it, right? Talking about how to help them about it, and not really to guilt trip anyone or shame anyone as part of that reminding. I think that's something that is a very difficult line to draw. Obviously, you guys are all trying. Thank you so much for sharing today. There's so many nuggets of examples that you guys shared, the difficulties, but kind of forging ahead. And also, I think the beautiful part of seeing this as a two-way relationship. There are things that the children are role modeling for us, the way they frame the issues, because they are looking at it from the children's eyes, and that helps you as well to kind of carry on the journey, or to be able to remind yourself that there's a different point of view in all of these issues. I think there are some of these things that you've shared today it's been really lovely. I'm very glad that we've had this hour together, and thank you so much for your evening.
Thank you
so much for having us. Yeah. I did enjoy the whole hour too. It was a really nice conversation for us.
Cool. Yeah. Have a great evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. And we do have a next webinar coming up. It's about the education landscape and how the different ways of educating our children in Singapore about a world that is now existing with climate change. So you can sign up for that. The link is now in our Facebook chat. Cool. Perfect. Have a good evening, everyone. Bye.
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 Bye.